Hello and welcome to a post-game edition of the Cyclone Insider podcast and live stream. I'm Travis Hines. He's Randy Peterson coming to you from Iowa State's or following Iowa State's 30-9 season opening victory against Northern Iowa, in which Iowa State did not quite everything right, but pretty darn near close to it in a no doubt drama-free victory, which has been in short supply against Northern Iowa in recent years. But Iowa State, the better team from start to finish, get off the bat with a pick six from Jeremiah Cooper, the first in 2 years for Iowa State. Do pretty well on special teams, efficient offensively. Not a overwhelming performance, not an explosive performance from Iowa State, but a good performance, certainly, for Iowa State heading into the Cy-Hawk game next week, Randy.
Yeah, you said it exactly right, Travis, about the drama-free. That's exactly what Iowa State needed. They needed a game where there was no doubt who was going to win, and there was absolutely no doubt. I mean, it's been, we don't need to go over it, but it's been a long off season since last year's whatever that was loss at TCU. It's been a heck of a long season, and Cartavius Norton talked about that a little bit after the game. I think this game, Campbell couldn't have drawn it up any better. I honestly believe that. There's plenty of room to improve. They got very significant play out of true freshmen, including Abu Sama. Yes, I've said many times I'm an Abu Sama guy. I live in the Southeast Polk School District. But nonetheless, J.J. Cole played at quarterback. Jack Sadowski started at linebacker, and there's, I don't know, what we count, 8 true freshmen, 8, whatever, yeah, 8 or 9, I don't know how many true freshmen that played. So, and nobody really played bad. I mean, for Iowa State, I mean, it was just a nice workmanlike game, exactly what Iowa State needed. It got the kinks out of a long off season, like we just said, and they can move forward. Yes, there were some mistakes, but I thought Iowa State did a great job, and I knew Iowa State would against Theo Day, the Michigan State transfer quarterback at Northern Iowa, who's got some pro feelers out there, from what I understand, at least consideration out there. I mean, he was 16 out of 34 for 164 yards, 1 touchdown, and he threw 2 picks, both of those by Jeremiah Cooper. I mean, that's not NFL-like, but he's also throwing into certainly the best secondary he'll pass into this season, and certainly one of the best secondaries in the Big 12, if not the best secondary in the Big 12. So Iowa State's going to cause a lot of supposedly good quarterbacks a lot of problems this year. So all in all, I don't think Iowa State could have scripted it any better.
Speaking of quarterbacks on the Iowa State side, Rocco Beck gets the start, as I think many were expecting. Goes 10 of 13 for 113 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. J.J. Cole goes 4 of 5 for 3 yards, no interceptions. Beck played, I think, started all but 2 drives until I think maybe all game long, or until the game was out of hand there. Again, nothing spectacular. 10 of 13 is good. 113 yards is nothing to write home about. 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Efficiency, which, even when you go back to the Brock Purdy years, that's when Iowa State was at its best, when he'd complete a bunch of passes and you'd look down and be like, oh, he's still only got 225 yards or whatever it would be. So that is a recipe for success for Iowa State. And I think, Rocco even said after the game that they were being pretty conservative, which I think is what you would normally see against an FCS opponent, with your rival Big Ten school looming in the next week. But I don't know that we know a lot about either of these quarterbacks, having watched them today. I think obviously they trust in Rocco to be the guy for the moment and want to get J.J. Cole involved. But I don't know that I have any grand pronouncements about that quarterback position after 60 minutes of football, Randy.
No, I agree. And Rocco made some plays with his, he rushed 10 yards. I guess he made a couple of rushes. And Campbell talked about those. But yeah, you said it right. again. He managed the game. That's exactly what they wanted. And there is room for improvement. They didn't do anything dumb. They didn't show anything. They were very vanilla. The only thing they showed was, and we can talk about this later or now. Heck, let's do it now. The 4th and 1 call at the goal line where Iowa State, Nate Schillhouse, the new offensive coordinator, said, what the heck, we're going for it, which I expected he would. They're at home. They're on the 1 yard line. It's early in the game. Iowa State's got momentum. Yeah, I expected they would. Rocco went under center and sneaked the yard for a touchdown. That was really kind of cool. I mean, that was that was a feather in Schillhouse's cap that a play that play worked, because it's not all the time that Iowa State goes under center. I think everybody that's seen Iowa State knows that. So, and another thing that really caught my eye, Travis, was that, and I touched on this earlier, that there was so much youth that played in this game for Iowa State. And that we talked about the freshmen, obviously, or just the number of freshmen, but this team is also, and we've talked about it here before, but this team is also trying to get to a bowl game also while developing and getting momentum for maybe the youngest team that Campbell's had. I mean, there were 17 players. I think it's more than that. There's a number of players on the depth chart that were redshirt sophomores or younger. That shows how good this team could be in the future, at least how the trending, the way the recruiting's going, and the recruiting, supposedly, if you believe the stars, a good class is shaping up for the next recruiting class. So this was a big victory, a good victory for Iowa State. Northern Iowa isn't great. This is not one of the best teams that Mark Farley's had, at least not yet. At least not yet. Now, I'm not saying it won't happen, but Northern Iowa couldn't barely fire a bullet against Iowa State on Saturday at Jack Trice. So, and I guess that's something we've come to expect when we see teams try to play against that Iron Curtain defense that John Haycock coaches. So, yeah, I mean, and once again, the defense, we were talking about the offense, all the youth on the offense, but the defense again came through with darn near a shutout.
To stick with the offense here for a minute too, Randy, I mean, we talked about quarterback, but running back has been a topic of much interest, obviously. With Cartavius Norton getting healthy, goes 50 yards on 11 carries for 4.5 yards a carry. Abu Sama, I thought, was maybe the surprise of the day. Not that he was good. I think we've heard a lot of buzz about him throughout camp, but that he was used as much and was as effective as he was, going for 40 yards on 6 carries, 6.7 yards per carry. Eli Sanders goes for 5 for 13. But yeah, I think Sama opened some eyes. But and Norton, I thought, looked a lot like the guy we saw in that opener against Southeast Missouri last year. That turned a lot of heads, and kind of had the same thing again today. I thought is Abu Sama, I think, turned a lot of heads and made a lot of fans here today.
And the thing that I talked to Cartavius about Abu, and I asked him, I said, just what are your thoughts about him? And Cartavius said that he's taking Abu under his wing. I mean, Abu is a true freshman, like Cartavius was last year. And he knows that true freshmen can have highs, that they can have lows. He talked about, and he said that right now Abu is probably on a pretty nice high after having a good game, coming out of the chute, your first game in college. Darn near broke a couple of them. I mean, he was just maybe one or two jukes or jives away from scoring. But now Cartavius said that it's tomorrow. It's going to be about bringing Abu, if in fact he is, when he walks into the locker room tomorrow, if he is still, thinking about today's game, just to bring him back and say, hey, we start all over now. You come back to reality. And I'm pretty sure that Cartavius will get that accomplished. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy that we can watch throughout the season is Cartavius and Abu Sama. And it's just too bad that I think folks watching this know that Iowa State is one of the schools. It's not the only school on the planet, but it's one of the schools where we cannot talk to true freshmen. So, which is unfortunate. I really thought that might change with the name, image, and likeness stuff passing a couple of years ago, but so far it hasn't. So I'd really love to hear Abu's, take on this game, but be that as it may. So Cartavius was really high on he was Abu Sama's biggest fan on Saturday. That's for sure.
Big day for the tight ends with Ben Brammer and Tyler Moore each catching a touchdown. Quiet day for the wide receivers, although I think both Beck and J.J. Cole missed guys open down the field with overthrows that could have been big plays and maybe touchdowns. But Randy, defensively, Iowa State really good. Played a lot of guys up front. Jeremiah Cooper, obviously the star with the 2 picks, including the one for a touchdown. Thought the linebacking group was really interesting to watch. I counted at least 8 guys that played in there, including a true freshman, Jack Sadowski, getting the start. But Caleb Bacon, who I don't think either of us had ever said his name out loud or written it, had a huge game with 2 sacks, was in a bunch of plays. But you saw a lot of guys make contributions there, kind of the same thing up front with the defensive line. But I think given what we knew about the secondary, an encouraging game about that front 6 for Iowa State defensively, which was unproven and remains to large degree coming into this game with a lot of new faces.
Yeah, I don't know how we know yet. We can't. We just need more evidence. But I can't remember any big gaffes from anybody there. But I guess we'll see going forward because it's Iowa State from here on out, the next 11 opponents will be better than what they face against Northern Iowa. But nonetheless now, Iowa State beat Northern Iowa, a team that beat them handily, a team that Iowa State's had trouble beating in the past. So the fact that so many players got in the game, I don't know. I'm going to go back and look when I get home how many underclassmen did play, but that's going to be a big number. I'm going to try to go back and compare it maybe to the first season opening games the last few years, and like I said, I bet it is a big number, and there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. Yes, that's a cliche, but it's going to happen. We'll see. But with Iowa coming in next week, and I can only imagine, I'm sure there's plenty of teachable moments on their tape from Saturday's narrow win, I guess you'd say, against Utah State. And then after that, Iowa State goes on the road for the first time with a very young team. So I sense that Campbell said it after the game. He's going to, as soon as he was done with us, he was going to go look at the tape, go see what, and I thought it was interesting to go see what some of those plays that were, Campbell always talks about plays just missing by a hair, to find out what that hair was, what could have been. I mean, he mentioned a couple of times about Sama, who a couple of times could have had bigger runs, but it just was like a one move here, he was one move away, or something like that. So they'll get it broken down, and then tomorrow they'll be right back at it. So I like this team. I like where it's at right now, especially given the longest off season and I'm going to say Iowa State football history. With everything that's gone on, I think this is a way just to cleanse, to get rid of that, to scrub that away and start anew.
Excuse me. Yeah, I think before we look again to next week, it's worth talking about the special teams.
Yeah,
which has been such a topic of conversation over the last few years, to put it kindly.
I'm thinking back what Campbell said about your question.
Regardless, 56-yard field goal from Chase Contreras, 39-yard punt return, followed by a 21-yard punt return from Jalen Knoll, both of which are already longer than any punt return they had last year. Tyler Perkins, the punter, boots one 70 yards.
Yeah.
Longest punt for a Cyclone since 2010, and averages 53.6, I think.
53.6, yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
They botched a long snapper holder exchange on a PAT. They got called for a penalty on a big kick return that keep it from being a perfect game for Iowa State, but certainly a net positive for the special teams and a huge net positive for Iowa State in the special teams, which I think bodes well for them going forward, because for however else you want to look at it, there have been negative plays in that special teams
without question
over the last few years.
I mean, Matt can say what he wants. But there have been negative plays, and those negative plays have stood out more so than the positive plays, because we all know that this is a program that, quote unquote, if it's going to win, it's got to win the close games, win in the margins, as they call it. And that's special teams. That's exactly what that comes down to, is special teams. And last year, Iowa State didn't have the kind of special teams that could overcome, that could score in those situations, that they could win those close games. So now with Chase Contreras, and Campbell talked about that a little bit today, that your special teams are going to be good. Special teams are good when they've got a kicker. Essentially, he went back to talking about Mevis a few years ago. That kid was great. I'm not saying Chase Contreras is going to be great, but by golly, he was darn good today. He was spectacular today. And he kicked that 56-yarder on back-to-back timeout. Iowa State called a timeout, and then Farley at Northern Iowa turned around and called a timeout. So he did that on back-to-back. After back-to-back timeouts, he did that on the last play of the first half, and the jubilation on the Iowa State sidelines at that point in time. Oh my gosh, it was something like, and I mentioned about ridding themselves of washing away anything of the offseason and last season. That was to me, that was a cleansing moment for Iowa State, was that field goal. I mean, the whole team was just in unison, jumping up and down on each other, and it was like they won the World Series. But that was good. And like I said, there's going to be ups and downs, but Contreras is a veteran kicker. So I don't know if I ever feel confident that he's going to make a game-winning kick, but certainly he after game one, he looks to have that potential.
Iowa State wins 30-9 over UNI at Jack Trice Stadium. Over in Iowa City, the Hawkeyes beat Utah State 24-14. Randy, you and I were able to watch kind of bits and pieces of that the first half, certainly before the Iowa State game kicked off. From what I gathered from our colleagues over in Iowa City, fast start for the Hawkeyes, not much of a strong finish, even in a win. From what we saw both on TV of Iowa and in person against Iowa State, I don't know that I feel strongly one way or another that my opinion on that game has changed much from either team. I think it'll be what we normally see in a Cy-Hawk, and that's a close game.
I agree 100%. And yes, I agree. I was, you and I were watching that part of the early parts of that game together. And I know, and we all know that Iowa is the kind of team that get ahead and then shut down. And which they, I don't know whether they did or not. I'm not close to the Iowa program anymore, but I know the Iowa State played very conservatively, and I don't think Iowa was ever in jeopardy of losing that game. I'm just guessing
they didn't get to 25 points though. Like that was a game you had to juice it a little bit.
They didn't get to 25 points. But you're right. But that's interesting. That's going to be interesting to watch all year. But they can win 11 games and not average that many points with the defense they have, nonetheless. Next week's game, speaking of defenses, my gosh, would it shock you, Travis, to see a game like last year, 10-7?
No, I mean, I would imagine it'll be a low scoring game,
Yeah.
which again, like the special teams are going to matter. The turnovers are going to matter. It's going to be a lot of the cliche stuff that you hear people talk about, that you see win and lose games. And I anticipate that'll be the case to a large degree on Saturday. 2:30 kick on Fox. Excuse me. Iowa State, both undefeated heading into that game. Be sure to check out DesMoinesRegister.com for all your Cyhawk coverage needs, and certainly today for all our coverage from Iowa State's 30-9 win over UNI, along with our colleagues Alyssa Hurdle and Tommy Birch, who also contributed stories today. Lots of good stuff on DesMoinesRegister.com today, throughout the weekend, and into next week. He's Randy Peterson. I'm Travis Hines. This has been the Cyclone Insider podcast and live stream. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.